Does life continue beyond our physical bodies? In this video, I'm going to talk about this crazy encounter I had with what I believe could have been a ghost.
Are you listening?
So this video is all about this crazy encounter that I had with what I believe could have been a ghost. My name is Timothy Schultz. I actually made a film about ghosts and the possibility of life after death, a documentary called Chasing the Shadows. I'll put a link to that below. But if you're new to my channel, go ahead and consider subscribing because I do weekly vlogs, reviews, and interviews with some of the most fascinating people I can find, and also interviews with lottery winners because I actually am a lottery winner. In 1999, I won the Powerball before going back to study film and journalism and broadcast news, and now I'm combining my experience with my interest in interviewing other lottery winners. So if you're interested in seeing some of those, go ahead and consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when these videos, these interviews come out. But one of the things I did after going to college to study film and journalism was produce a feature-length documentary about ghosts. It took 5 years to produce this film. I went all around the world looking for the world's most haunted places, including the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, which is the inspiration to Stephen King's classic horror novel, The Shining. We sent a crew to Benin, Africa, the birthplace of voodoo, and explored some haunted castles in Italy, and went to many other locations. And so I went into all these many different places that are supposedly haunted, and the majority of the time that the camera was on, I think we shot around 500 hours of footage, I didn't experience something every time the camera was on. It wasn't like ghosts just came popping out of the woodwork. And I didn't want to fabricate or lie or manipulate anything to make better television like they oftentimes do, because I wanted to be authentic and real, and I have morals. And so that's why we shot so much footage and pared the film down into the best of the best. Again, I'll put a link to that film below. But this video is all about this experience that I had that I believe was, could be at least, an encounter with a ghost. This was not part of the film. This is just something that happened in my personal life way before making the film. And I've had a few experiences in my life that I couldn't rationally explain by today's science. So I find this type of thing very, very interesting. This channel isn't necessarily about this type of thing, but I do from time to time videos on these types of subjects, and we'll be interviewing other people, including psychics and scientists, about this type of thing because I find it very interesting. But I know a lot of people don't believe in any of this. They think it's just pseudoscience, and I personally don't blame you. If you haven't experienced something for yourself, why would you believe that? And so I actually also made a film called The Cave, an adaptation of Plato's allegory in clay, stop motion animation, award-winning film that I'll put a link to that film below. But that film is basically about a prisoner that's stuck in a cave and one day is released. It's an ancient story by Plato, and the prisoner is released and sees what's making these shadows on a wall in front of the prisoners, because before he was released, all he knew was the shadows. That was his whole reality. And so once he's released, he sees what's casting the shadows and that they're actually shadows, and goes back in to tell the others, and they don't believe him. And so a lot of people use that video as a way to be open-minded to other possibilities. But regardless, this video is not about trying to convince anybody that ghosts exist or don't exist. That's not what this video is about. I'm not here to convince anybody. If you don't believe in ghosts and you're completely skeptical, that is perfectly fine with me, because I don't feel that's my purpose. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just wanting to share my experience because I know that other people are interested in this type of thing. And so anyway, on Christmas Eve, quite a few years ago, my family had a celebration. When it was over, my cousins gave me a ride home. At that time, I was I think I was like 19 years old. So I was living at my parents' house. And so my cousins drove me home and dropped me off. But on the way home, we drove past a cemetery, and that's where my grandparents were buried. And so we started naturally talking about what they were like and what we knew of their lives, and anything we knew about their history, because that's what we have in common, because they were my cousins. And so we were talking about that, and then they dropped me off at my parents' house, and I got out of the car and went into the house and felt this presence, like this energy, this person behind me, but it wasn't a person. It appeared more like a shadow, and I just felt this energy, this person like right over my shoulder. And so I walked to the next room, and I still felt it, and it was very uncomfortable, and I was frightened because I was like, what the heck is this? And I just felt like I was not alone. I felt like someone was peering down at me. And we were talking about my grandfather prior to getting out of the car, so I thought maybe that's what it was, because it just wasn't normal. And I'm not the type of person that like senses ghosts or can talk to ghosts, or that I just see spirits all the time. That's not like that's not who I am. That doesn't happen to me all the time. And so anyway, it just freaked me out, and I was convinced that it was my grandfather. And so who I didn't even know in real life, but we were talking about him and happened to drive by the cemetery. So I didn't know for sure if it was my grandfather, but I was frightened. And so I went from room to room, just hoping it would go away. And, I got the Christmas stockings out. My parents weren't home yet, but I got them out to hang up, because that's a tradition we do or did on Christmas Eve. And so I brought those up, and I still felt like this presence, and it was just really freaking me out. So I went and I sat down in the recliner and turned on the television, hoping that it would go away, and it still didn't go away. And so then my dog at the time, it was this giant yellow Labrador, came over and didn't look at me. It looked directly above me, where I felt this presence, and started barking. And then it just was gone like that. And then it left. And I was so relieved that it did leave, but it was just a freaky thing. And so then fast forward to probably like a couple years later, I was talking to this person that claimed to be psychic, and it was actually on the internet. And I wasn't paying this person any money at all. They just wanted to prove to me that they were psychic. And I'm naturally, you might not know it by this video, but I'm naturally a skeptical person. I don't necessarily believe that everything is a ghost. I think a lot of what we see in our media that claims to be a ghost or poltergeist activity and all this stuff, the paranormal, a lot of that is fake. It's totally fake. And even more of it is made up in our minds. I think our minds are capable of incredible things. But that at my parents' house was very freaky, and I know that the dog saw what I was feeling, because the dog was barking at it, and then it left. But anyway, so I fast forward to this supposed psychic who I'm talking to on the internet, and this person's trying to convince me that they're psychic, and I'm skeptical because I don't know anything about them. I think there are plenty of people that claim to be psychic that are not, but I also think there are some very talented psychics out there, and I do believe that is possible. So I asked this person about this Christmas Eve encounter. Like, who was this? I didn't explain many of the details to the psychic. I just said basically we were talking about my grandfather, who I didn't know in real life, and I went back home and felt this spirit, and then the dog started barking at it, and I kept it pretty vague. And then the psychic said basically, he said, well, who is the person on your mom's side who had the brain trouble, who lost their memory, and then they went into a nursing home, and then you played guitar for them when you were a little boy, and you thought that they didn't know that you were there, but they actually did, and they want to thank you for that. I was like, oh my God, that's not my grandfather. That's my grandmother, who I actually did know, and she died of Alzheimer's. She had Alzheimer's. And as a little boy, I would play guitar for her in the nursing home. And so how would this random psychic that doesn't know anything about me, he doesn't even know my name, pull this out of a hat, just from me asking him and referring to this Christmas Eve incident, Can you explain that to me? If he is not psychic and not tapping into that, how would he know that? That like it was very surprising to me, first of all, and it convinced me that it was my grandmother, most likely, because how else would he know those details about me going into a nursing home and playing guitar? I think a lot of quote unquote ghosts aren't necessarily a scary thing. They're scary because they're not. This is if you accept that the possibility of a ghost is something that might exist. And I think, a lot of our science doesn't even understand a lot of this type of stuff. That we can't explain a lot of this type of stuff scientifically. That doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily exist. I think people used to think the world was flat. Some people still think the world is flat, and more power to them. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't believe anything, but I just think that it's important to be open-minded about some things because our current science isn't able to explain everything. And when it comes to ghosts and spirits, I believe in the possibility of those things existing. I don't think that a lot of what we see in our media is true, and I don't think that necessarily everything we imagine or experience or think might be a ghost is necessarily a ghost. I don't think that. Like I try to be critical, but I have had experiences that I can't explain by rational science, and this is one of them. If you're accepting that it's possible that a ghost might exist, then, I think it's scary if we can't see someone like we see each other in a physical body. If it's more like subtle energy or a sense that someone is in the corner of your eye or a smell or maybe manipulation of electricity or a dream or something subtle or something that is sort of scary because it's not like we can just talk to each other like we are right now and look at each other in our physical bodies. But if it really is possible that life continues beyond our physical bodies, then maybe it's not as scary as it seems. If that really was just my grandmother just wanting to say hi and show that, that she's around, that's not so scary. It's just that I didn't recognize that that's what was happening. But anyway, or you might just think I'm completely crazy and nuts and not believe in any of this stuff. And that's fine too. But for those of you out there that think that that believe that it's possible that we might live beyond our physical bodies, I found this experience inspirational and quite remarkable, actually, because I don't know how that psychic would have been able to tell me that. But anyway, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And have you had any experiences with something that you think might have been a ghost? If so, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I do more vlogs like this one and interviews with other people I find fascinating. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support.